We leave Wales and travel north for round 3, the Melville Enduro, which took place on the 28th and the 29th of June. The special test was fairly close to the start area, so convenient for our spectators. That was Jonty Edmonds going over one of the jumps. Jonty was hoping for a good ride this weekend, but on the very first test something went seriously wrong. He ended up on the ground because the throttle had jammed open. Some riders were quite ambitious going over this jump. That was Julian Oakes. Joel Mitson and one or two other riders thought they'd found a better line through the trees. Mark Vaughan took it fairly steady. That was a good jump by Rob Rayford. Richard Hay riding on home ground this weekend. It was a bit early in the morning for Wyn Hughes. He nearly lost it there. The championship riders were to be timed on 3 laps of this special test. Number 12, Ewan Knight. A.D. Smith followed the same line as Joel Mitson, and Carl Tyley went the same way. Was there something wrong with him today? He was looking like a Clubman rider. Did he know that he was being timed on this test? It didn't look like it because Carl made a couple of mistakes. Out on the go-in, on the very tops of the hills, it was quite foggy. The championship riders were doing 2 laps of the course, 151 miles, and they would be riding for over 7 hours. The fog didn't lift until late in the morning. 1 or 2 riders got lost. Tim Lewis went the wrong way. Carl Tyley was looking much better now. It was a tough day for the championship class and only 3 riders went clean. Paul Maguire, riding a Yamaha 263, lost 2 minutes on the go-in and finished 9th overall. Geraint also dropped 2 minutes but beat Paul on the test by 14 seconds to take 8th place. Mark Vaughan was 9 minutes late on one of the tight checks. He had stopped because Jonty Edmonds had crashed and Mark didn't want to leave him in the trees. Mark's time card was first adjusted to give him a clean sheet. That seemed to be the only fair thing to do. But then later on he was given a 2-minute penalty. Richard Hay was one of 3 riders who lost only a minute on the go-in. Richard finished in 6th place overall. He did make a couple of mistakes on the test. Ewan Knight also dropped a minute on the go-in, but he was much quicker on the test than Richard Hay, finishing about 60 seconds up. Wyn Hughes also lost a minute, had a 20-point penalty for something, but he'd done some very fast test times. A.D. Smith was clean on the go-in, but he hadn't had a very good day. Everything went well for A.D. until the end of the day. He was 2nd on the first test, 3rd on the next one, but on the last test of the day, he was nearly 2 minutes down on the rest of the field. A.D. made a couple of big mistakes, and although he was clean on the go-in and Wyn Hughes had dropped a minute, Wyn still finished in front of him. Carl Tyley was clean on the go-in, but he'd lost a good 30 seconds on that first test. We saw him making a couple of mistakes. He won the next test in style, pulling back 8 seconds on the rest of the field. On the last test of the day, like A.D. Smith, Carl was a bit slower. He dropped down into 4th place. That was just for the final test. Overall, he was going to finish runner-up for the day. He was getting tired by now. That was one mistake he could have done without. At the end of the day, I asked him what went wrong on the first test. The fat going round.
It wasn't timed. No, I was told it wasn't timed.
You came off in the stream, didn't you? And you didn't
stopped and had a look.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, I was there. Yeah.
And then I fell off again. Had a look.
That's right. Yeah.
I was running around on a look.
Yeah, no. Would Carl have won the day if he hadn't made those mistakes on the first test? Well, the man who beat him was Rob Sartin, and it was quite a big margin, over 40 seconds. Rob was clean on the going. He'd won the first test and was second on laps 2 and 3. He desperately needed the points this weekend after that disaster right at the end of the ISCA. Because he managed to finish the ISCA, he did score 5 points on that second day. It could be crucial towards the end of the series. A good turnout in the expert class. Nearly 50 competitors had made the long journey to the Melville. How many would we see finishing at the end of the day? That was the big question. The expert riders were doing the same course as the championship, 151 miles, and they'd got only an extra 16 minutes. The time to see most of these riders was on the very first test. Some of them wouldn't get back here again. 7 experts started in the 4-stroke class. None of them finished the first day. What happened to them, I wonder? Did they get lost in the fog? It was quite difficult to find the way. Some of the riders were bunching up. When the riders had completed 1 lap and were starting the second test, we'd lost nearly 20. Murray Thompson liked this sort of going, but he was having an indifferent day. He was 5 minutes down on the going, and on his last test of the day, he made a few mistakes. Murray will tell us what went wrong. I couldn't understand him, but I'm sure the locals knew what he meant. Number 56, Cy Higgins, had lost 6 minutes on the going, but his test times were better than Murray, and Cy finished 7th overall. Win Hope dropped only 4 minutes on the going. He was runner-up in the 125s. Only 2 of them finished the day. Hope he made a few mistakes on the test. It didn't matter though. He finished 6th overall. Neil Williams finished the day with a clean sheet. He liked this sort of going. Wasn't too quick on the test though, and for that reason he was 5th overall. Neil was beaten by Gas rider Steve Saunders. He was clean on the going and he'd done some good tests. Steve was 2nd in his class at the Breckland. We didn't see him at the ISCA. Steve Saunders was beaten today by fellow trials rider Wayne Braybrook. Wayne won the first test. He was 2nd on the other 2. Should have won the event overall, but he lost a minute on the going. We saw Wayne briefly at the Breckland. He didn't finish that one. Our top trials riders are certainly going well at Enduros. Runner-up on this first day and the top 125cc rider is number 36, Rowan Jones. He was clean on the go-in. Rowan was about 21 seconds up on Braybrook. Rowan was used to this sort of going, very much like Wales. And the man who beat Rowan was the top 250cc rider, John Shirt from Buxton. John was clean on the go-in and he really won the event with his last test of the day. He beat Rowan on that one by over 30 seconds. John scoring 20 points and Rowan scoring 17 meant that there was a tie at the top now. They both had 79 points. This was a very tough day for the expert riders, only the best finished. Even Shirty looked tired when he got in. He managed to find enough energy to fit a new tyre for day 2. At the start of day 1 there were over 60 riders in the Clubman class. Now last year the Melville Enduro was only a one-day event and some of the Clubman riders didn't think that they had their money's worth. They were in for quite a shock this weekend though. The course for the Clubman riders, 151 miles, exactly the same as for the championship class. The times for the Clubman were just a little bit slower, but not much. How many would finish at the end of the day? This first test of the day was quite an eye-opener for some of the Clubman riders. There were 15 four-stroke riders in the Clubman class. Only 2 of them managed to finish the first lap. The foggy conditions which we'd seen earlier on the top of the hill didn't help matters, but there were a couple of very steep hill climbs and this had caught out a lot of the riders. Mike Rapley was concentrating. When I got back to the test to see the Clubman riders coming through on their second lap, they were down to 16. There was another full lap of the course after this second test, then a third test. Only 9 Clubman riders finished the day. Stephen Williamson Forden was the only four-stroke rider to finish. That was a great achievement for him. Dave Cholwell finished in 8th place. He'd lost a lot of time. No one had gone clean in the Clubman class. Ian Patterson won the Open Clubman class. He lost 16 minutes on the go-in and finished in 6th place overall. Mike Rapley won the over 40s class, and although he lost 18 minutes on the go-in, he managed to beat Ian Patterson. Mike had done a couple of good test times, and Ian was rather slow on his last test. So Mike finished in 5th place overall. Will Midgley dropped 13 minutes on the go-in. That put him in 4th place overall, and 3rd in the 125cc class. Will struggled a bit on a couple of the tests. Russell Jones from Wrexham finished 3rd overall, and although he'd lost 16 minutes on the go-in, he managed to beat Will Midgley. Russell did some very good test times. There were two Clubman riders who stood out from the rest. Number 100, William Jones from Ystrad Mairig. He was the top 125cc rider, and he dropped only 6 minutes on the go-in. It was maximum points for William on this first day of the Melville. And the top Clubman rider, who was really in a class of his own, was number 116, Andy Elliott from Newton Abbot. He dropped only 2 minutes on the go-in. Andy won the 250cc class, and of course he beat William Jones by over 3 minutes. This first day of the Melville had really demolished the Clubman class. There would be only 9 starters tomorrow. A few riders came off on this test. Look out for George Brent. Here he comes.
All right, George.
Number 44, Pete Brown from Kendal. He was slipping all over the place. Local man Dougal Walker did a lap of honour on this test. It was quite entertaining. On Sunday morning, there was plenty of room on the car parking area. Those riders who hadn't finished yesterday had already gone home. But for those who were still in the event, and there were only about 38, there were some changes today. The start time had been put back to 11 o'clock, but all 38 riders would leave in about 15 minutes. Some big changes had been made to the special test. The start and finishing points had been moved. Some of the very tricky wet sections had been cut out altogether. And the good news of the day was that all the riders would be doing just 1 lap of the course. Derek Jaffrey's score from the Melville, 39 points. It was a good weekend for him. The top 250cc rider on both days was Andy Elliott. On Sunday he finished down in 6th place, but because he'd only dropped 2 minutes on the Saturday, he took the Premier Award. Will Midgley had finished 3rd in the 125s yesterday, and he did the same again today. William Jones from Ystrad Mairig was the top 125cc rider on day 1. He dropped only 6 minutes on the go-in. Today, though, he had to settle for 2nd place in the class. William's score from this round in Scotland, 42 points. Mike Rapley was to finish runner-up on this second day, and of course he was the top rider in the over 40s class, winning both days. Rappers was beaten by the top 125cc rider on this second day. That was Russell Jones from Wrexham. The difference, though, only 12 seconds. Russell's score for the weekend was the same as William Jones's, 42 points. The final places for the weekend were Russell Jones 3rd, William Jones runner-up, and of course the winner, Andy Elliott. 12 experts started this second day, and all of them would finish. It was clear up on the top of the hill, and if you did get lost, well, you only had to look at the signposts. Stan Young, the clerk of the course, was keen to see how things were going.
Good afternoon, Jen.
It was a good weekend for Hopi. He scored 39 points in the class. Murray Thompson finished clean, and he won the open section. Number 54, Dave Hammond, lost a lot of time yesterday. He was clean today, though, and finished 7th overall. Gary Flowers beat Dave by about 11 seconds on this second day, and Gary's score for the weekend was 26 points. Number 61, Ian Mundell, he'd had a bad first day. He lost 48 minutes. Day 2 was much better for him, though. He finished 4th in the 250s. It was Cy Higgins who beat Ian on this second day. The difference in test times about 16 seconds. I don't know what happened to Neil Williams. He was down as losing 3 minutes on the go-in. Cy Higgins scored 31 points in the 250cc class and he finished 6th overall for the weekend. The gas rider, John Shirt, of course, he'd won the first day, started well on Sunday morning. He was second on the first test, but made a few mistakes after that. John was clean on the go-in, but because of the mistakes on the test, he finished 3rd overall on this second day. John had beaten Rowan on day 1, but now Rowan was to get his own back. After the first test of the day, though, John had a 3-second lead. Although Rowan's second test was a bit slower than the first, he didn't make any mistakes, and on that test he beat John by 14 seconds. Rowan won the 125cc class on both days, and in the championship he scored 39 points, and John Shirt had scored 40. Rowan didn't win this second day outright, though. He was beaten by number 47, Wayne Braybrook from Burnley. Wayne should have won the first day, but he dropped a minute on the go-in. On this second day, he won both special tests convincingly and beat Rowan by 25 seconds. Like John Shirt, Wayne scored 40 points in the championship.
Had a good day? Yeah. Well done. All right, Rowan? You had a good day? Go here. What happened on the test, John?
Me?
Yeah.
Crashing, small problem.
Yeah, well done. I had the camera on you at the time.
Did you? Go back, yeah. Please stop crashing, we're all going to give up.
It was a fairly straightforward day for the championship class. 1 lap of the course, 2 special tests. Most of them went clean. 2 riders lost time. They were both on Suzukis. Richard Hay was one of them, and he lost 9 minutes on the go-in. The other rider was Julian Oakes, and he'd had 1 or 2 problems on Saturday. Jonty Edmonds had crashed yesterday, and he'd gone home, so the points in the 125cc class were up for grabs. Andrew Edwards finished 3rd on this second day. Mark Vaughan had a good first test to give him the lead in the class, but he was only a fraction of a second up on Tim Lewis. On the second test, Vaughan made a mistake which cost him valuable points. Was he distracted by the lady photographer? You'll see her in a moment. He went all to pieces after passing her. Had Tim Lewis paid her to stand there, I wonder? Tim didn't make any mistakes, and he scored maximum points on this second day. But over the weekend, he and Vaughan both finished on 42. In the open class, Paul Maguire finished runner-up on both days. It had been fairly close between him and Geraint. They both lost 2 minutes on Saturday. Over the 5 tests of the weekend, Geraint had won 3 of them against Paul's 2. This gave Geraint the lead of about 27 seconds. Yamaha rider Ewan Knight had finished 5th in the 250s on both days and 5th overall. Ewan had dropped a minute on the first day, and that made all the difference. Carl Tyley had a slow test on this Sunday morning. It dropped him 18 seconds off the leaders. That was a lot to pull back because the test was much shorter than yesterday. On the final test of the weekend, he put in the third fastest time, but it wasn't a good result for Carl because he finished 4th overall on this second day. Over the weekend, he scored 35 points, should have done better. He made a mistake yesterday morning on the first test. Someone should have told him that it was being timed. A.D. Smith had finished 4th overall on the first day. He was down a bit because of a slow final test. He was wide awake on Sunday morning, putting in the fastest time of the day. But the lead he got then was only 0.6 of a second. AD needed to win the second test if he was going to score maximum points. The test had cut up a bit on the second lap and it was slipperier on some of the corners. AD made a mistake which must have cost him at least 20 seconds. After that mistake, he was lucky to beat Carl Tyley. There was only 5 seconds in it. While some riders were making mistakes, Wyn Hughes was having a great day. He was 3rd on the first test of the morning. On the next lap, he did the second fastest time, beating Carl Tyley by at least 9 seconds. Wyn was unlucky on the first day to drop a minute on the go-in. Even so, he scored 37 points for the weekend. There was only one rider who had been consistent from start to finish, and that was Rob Sartin. He was clean over the weekend and he'd won 2 out of the 5 tests and he was 2nd on all other 3. At the end of the 2 days, Rob had beaten the runner-up Carl Tyley by 76 seconds and Rob, of course, had scored a maximum of 45 points. In the championship series, after 3 rounds, the places were as follows. Wyn Hughes 4th with 73. Ewan Knight in 3rd place with 75 points. A.D. Smith runner-up on 88. But the man out in front was Rob Sartin with 90 points.